Have you ever felt it? That quiet, persistent pressure to do something, to perform an act of kindness that is visible, that can be seen, measured, and appreciated. We live in a world that celebrates the grand gesture, the person who stops to help another change a tire in the pouring rain, the colleague who brings in donuts for the entire office, the friend who showers you with gifts and affirmations. These are the stories we tell, the moments we capture and share. They are the currency of compassion in our social world, beautiful and necessary in their own right. But have you ever wondered about the other side of kindness? A quieter, more elusive form. A kindness that doesn't announce itself, that leaves no visible trace, and often goes completely unnoticed. What if one of the most profound acts of kindness isn't an action at all, but an inaction? A deliberate, conscious choice to refrain, to hold back, to not do something. This is a story about the space between the notes, the silence that gives music its meaning. And to explore it, I want to tell you about a young man named Leo. Leo was a pianist, and by all technical measures, he was brilliant. His fingers flew across the ivory keys with a precision that was almost mechanical. He could tackle the most complex sonatas, the most demanding etudes, without a single mistake. His timing was impeccable, his dynamics flawless. Yet, when he played, something was missing. You could admire his skill, you could marvel at his technique, but you didn't feel it. The music, for all its perfection, was cold. It was a flawless recitation of notes, not a conversation with the soul. It washed over you, impressive but sterile, leaving you untouched. Leo felt this void more than anyone. He chased perfection, believing that if he could just play faster, cleaner, more perfectly, the feeling, the magic, would finally emerge. But the harder he tried, the more hollow the music sounded, an echo in a vast, empty hall. He was playing every single note, but he wasn't creating music, and he had no idea why. What Leo was experiencing with his music is something we often experience in our lives. We believe that to be good, to be kind, we must constantly be doing. We must fill every available space with an action, a word, a gesture. The idea of doing nothing feels like a failure. It feels like apathy, indifference, or weakness. We rush to offer advice when a friend is hurting, believing our words are the solution. We jump into conflicts, thinking our intervention is necessary. We forward that piece of gossip, perhaps under the guise of just keeping you informed, because participating feels more involved than staying silent. We are a culture of players, all striving to hit every note perfectly. And in doing so, we often miss the music entirely. If this idea of a silent, invisible kindness is already sparking a new perspective for you, a quiet question in your mind, I invite you to take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decode Explained. We journey through these intricate landscapes of the mind together, every week, seeking not just answers, but deeper, more meaningful questions. By joining our community, you become part of a shared exploration into the heart of what it means to be human. Leo's life changed when he met an elderly teacher named Elias. Elias was nearly blind, his hands gnarled with age, but he was said to hear things in music that no one else could. In their first lesson, Leo played a frantic, complex piece by Liszt. He finished, hands trembling with exertion, sweat on his brow, expecting praise for his technical mastery. Elias was silent for a long time. The silence stretched, becoming more uncomfortable for Leo with each passing second. Finally, the old man spoke, his voice raspy like old parchment. "You played all the notes, my boy," he said softly. But you told me nothing. Leo's heart sank. It was the very criticism that haunted him. But I didn't miss a single one, Leo stammered. Elias smiled faintly. He tapped a worn, leather-bound score on the stand. The music is not just here, he said, pointing to a flurry of black notes. Then he moved his finger to a small, strange symbol, a squiggle that marked a moment of silence. It is also here. This is a rest. It is a space for the music to breathe. You do not play it. You honor it. You are so busy playing the sound that you have forgotten the power of silence. A power, I might add, that is far more difficult to master than any cascade of notes. This concept, the power of intentional silence, is not just a secret of music. It is a cornerstone of emotional intelligence. The psychologist and author Daniel Goleman, in his groundbreaking work, identified self-regulation as one of the key components of emotional intelligence. Self-regulation is, in its essence, the art of inaction. It is the ability to manage your disruptive emotions and impulses. It's the capacity to think before you act. It's the quiet, internal strength to pause, to create that rest Elias spoke of between a feeling and a reaction. When someone insults you, the impulse is to insult them back. Self-regulation is the moment of silence, where you choose a different path. When you feel a wave of anxiety, the impulse is to distract yourself, to numb it, to run. Self-regulation is the ability to sit with the discomfort, to breathe into it, to not act, allowing it to pass without causing collateral damage. This isn't passivity. It's a profound, active, and internal form of self-mastery. Researchers are beginning to formally recognize this quieter form of kindness. In a fascinating study published in the Journal of Social and Emotional Learning, researchers explored how adolescents define and experience kindness. They asked middle schoolers to give examples of kind acts. As you might expect, many responses involved visible actions: helping someone who fell, sharing lunch, giving a compliment. These are the equivalent of Leo's perfectly played notes: beautiful, important, and observable. But nestled among these responses was a different category of behavior, what the researchers called restraint-based kindness. One student wrote that a kind act was holding back from saying something insulting. Another young student, in a separate study where children were asked to draw acts of kindness, chose to illustrate a moment of not laughing at a classmate who had made a mistake. Think about the profound difference between these two forms of kindness. Helping someone who has fallen is a wonderful, empathetic act. It requires seeing a need and taking external action to meet it. But choosing not to say something insulting or not to laugh at someone's expense requires a different and arguably more complex set of internal skills. It requires, first, an awareness of your own internal impulse, the flash of judgment, the urge to use a sharp word. Second, it requires empathy, the ability to rapidly forecast how your action, your word, your laugh would make the other person feel. And third, it requires the self-regulatory strength Daniel Goleman describes, the power to veto that initial impulse in favor of a quieter, more compassionate choice. This isn't just not being mean. This is an active, deliberate, and deeply empathetic act of kindness that is performed entirely within the silent theater of your own mind. It is invisible. The other person may never even know that they were the recipient of your kindness, because the benefit they received was the absence of a wound. You gave them the gift of not being hurt. Leo, naturally, was frustrated by Elias's teaching. "How do I play silence?" he asked, exasperated. "It's nothing. There's nothing to do. Elias chuckled. Exactly, he replied. Your entire life, you have trained yourself to do. You see an empty space on the page, an empty moment in time, and you feel an overwhelming compulsion to fill it with noise, with action. You must unlearn this. This week, I don't want you to practice your scales. I want you to practice silence. Sit at your piano, but do not touch the keys. Look at the score. Find the rests. I want you to feel the tension in your fingers wanting to play. I want you to feel the impulse to make a sound. And I want you to just sit there and breathe and let the silence be. Let it speak to you. For days, Leo felt ridiculous. He would sit at the magnificent grand piano, the polished wood reflecting his impatient face, and do nothing. His mind screamed, "This is a waste of time. You're falling behind. You should be practicing." This inner voice is familiar to so many of us, isn't it? It's the voice of our productivity-obsessed culture, the voice that tells us our worth is measured by our output, by our actions. The silence felt like failure. But then, slowly, something began to shift. As he forced himself to sit in the quiet, he started to notice things he'd never noticed before. The way the afternoon light cast long shadows across the keys, the faint scent of old wood and lemon oil, the rhythmic creak of the old house. He began to hear the music around the music, and then he looked at the score, at a piece by Debussy he had always found difficult to interpret. He saw the notes, but for the first time, he truly saw the rests between them. He realized they weren't empty spaces. They were instructions. They were punctuation. They were the moments of inhale before a breathtaking vocal phrase, the pause that allows a profound thought to land. They were designed to create anticipation, to build tension, to allow for emotional release. The silence wasn't the absence of music. It was an integral, structural part of it. Elias had been right. The silence told a story. This dismantles a common and damaging misconception about kindness, that inaction is a sign of indifference. We often think, if you truly cared, you would do something. But is that always true? Consider the friend who comes to you, their heart shattered from a breakup. Our impulse, born of a genuine desire to help, is to fill the silence with action. We offer advice. You should get back out there. We make pronouncements. He was never good enough for you anyway. We try to fix it. We're playing a flurry of notes, hoping one of them will be the right one. But what if the kindest act is to simply sit with them in their pain? To not offer solutions, to not pass judgment, but to create a safe, silent space where they can simply feel what they need to feel. In this context, your silence is not indifference. It is a powerful statement of presence. It says, I am here with you. I am not afraid of your sadness. You do not need to perform for me or get over this for my comfort. I will hold this space for you. This is the kindness of restraint. It's the gift of allowing rather than fixing. This form of kindness requires what the researcher and author Brené Brown might call immense courage. It's often far easier and requires less vulnerability to jump into action than to sit still in discomfort, whether it's our own or someone else's. Action gives us a sense of control. Silence forces us to confront our powerlessness. Think of a heated argument with a loved one. In the heat of the moment, the easiest thing to do is to unleash a barrage of sharp, defensive words. It's a reactive, impulsive discharge of emotion. The harder thing, the thing that requires real strength, is to pause, to take a breath, to choose not to say the one thing you know will wound them most deeply, even if you feel justified in that moment. That pause, that silent act of restraint, is a profound act of love. It is choosing the long-term health of the relationship over the short-term satisfaction of winning the argument. It's a kindness they may never be aware of. They will never know the biting remark you held back. But the relationship is preserved because of that invisible, silent choice. One afternoon, as Leo sat in his usual silent vigil at the piano, Elias came into the room and placed a single, perfect apple on the polished wood next to him. "Tell me, Leo," the old man said, "when a seed is planted in the ground, what is the farmer's primary job?" Leo, thinking it was a trick question, said, "To water it, to give it sun, to fertilize it." "Yes, he does all those things," Elias agreed. "But what about when the seed is first underground, in the dark, gathering its strength to sprout? What is the farmer's job then?" Leo was quiet for a moment. "To wait," he said. "To do nothing. To trust the process." Elias's eyes, though clouded, seemed to sparkle. "And to protect the space around it," he added. "To not dig it up every day to see if it's growing. To not poke and prod it. The most crucial work is done in the dark, in the quiet. Your kindness, your music is the same. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for another person is to trust their process, to give them the quiet, protected space to grow, and to not dig them up to satisfy your own need to help." This metaphor of the protected space is so powerful. How often do we, with the best intentions, dig up the people we love? A teenager is struggling to find their path. We offer unsolicited career advice. We sign them up for courses. We constantly ask about their plans. We are poking and prodding the seed, creating anxiety instead of fostering growth. What if the kindest act was to express our faith in them and then step back? Creating a silent space of trust where they can figure it out on their own terms. A colleague makes a mistake at work. Our impulse might be to immediately report it, or to gossip about it, or to publicly correct them. We are exposing the fragile sprout to the harsh sun. What if the kindest act was to speak to them privately, or even, if the mistake is minor, to say nothing at all, allowing them the dignity to recognize and correct it themselves? This is the kindness of creating a sanctuary, not a spectacle. It is a quiet defense of another person's dignity. Leo finally began to understand. He started to practice differently. He would play a phrase and then deliberately pause, feeling the resonance of the notes fade into the room, feeling the anticipation for what would come next. He began to treat the rests not as interruptions, but as destinations in their own right. He discovered that the silences made the notes that followed them more poignant, more powerful. A soft, gentle note after a long pause could feel more heartbreaking than a thunderous chord. A sudden silence in the middle of a frantic passage could create a moment of breathtaking shock and clarity. He was no longer just playing notes. He was sculpting with sound and silence. He was telling stories. This brings us to another form of silent kindness that is critically important in our modern, hyper-connected world: the kindness of not participating. Gossip is the lifeblood of many social and professional circles. It creates a false sense of intimacy, a feeling of being in the know. When a juicy story about a mutual acquaintance lands in your group chat, the impulse is to add to it, to offer your own opinion, to ask for more details. Participating feels like connection. But what is truly happening? We are often bonding over the diminishment of another person. The kindest and often most courageous act in this scenario is silence. It's the choice not to forward the message. It's the choice to change the subject. It's the quiet refusal to add fuel to the fire. Your silence in that moment is a shield for the person being discussed. It's a tiny, invisible act of integrity. It's you, alone, deciding to protect a space of dignity for someone who isn't there. This is not passive. It is an active moral choice. It is the deep, quiet kindness of refusing to be an accomplice to casual cruelty. The day of Leo's big recital arrived. The hall was packed. He walked onto the stage, his heart pounding, not with the frantic anxiety of before, but with a calm, centered energy. He sat at the piano, and before he began, he did something unusual. He just sat there, in the silence. He let the ambient sounds of the hall, the coughs, the rustles, settle. He took a deep, slow breath and let the audience take one with him. He was honoring the silence before the first note was even played. And then he began. He played the same debut, but this time it was transformed. The notes soared, but it was the spaces between them that held the audience captive. He would let a chord hang in the air, its vibration seeming to touch every person in the room, before letting it dissolve into a profound, intentional quiet. In that quiet, you could feel a collective holding of breath. He had learned to play the rests. He had learned that the meaning was not just in the sound, but in the deliberate, artful absence of it. When the final note faded, there was a moment of stunned, absolute silence. It was not the awkward silence of confusion. It was the sacred silence of being deeply moved. Then the applause erupted, a roar that was more than just appreciation for technique. It was a release of shared emotion. People were weeping. They hadn't just heard music. They had been on a journey. Backstage, Elias greeted him not with effusive praise, but with a simple, knowing look. He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Tonight," the old man said, "you did not just play the piano. You made the silence sing." Leo's breakthrough is the breakthrough available to all of us. The singing silence he created is the same one we can create in our daily lives. It is the moment you choose to listen, truly listen, to a friend without interrupting to share your own story. You are letting their notes hang in the air, giving them the space to be heard. It is the decision not to post an angry, reactive comment online. Even when you feel provoked, you are refusing to add to the cacophony, honoring a space for civil discourse, even if you are the only one in that space. It is giving your child or your partner your undivided attention, putting your phone down and just being present with them in comfortable shared silence. You are communicating through your quiet presence that they are more important than any digital noise. Each of these is an act of profound kindness. Each is an act of restraint. Each involves choosing the quiet, difficult, and invisible path over the easy, loud, and performative one. So, how do we begin to cultivate this silent art of kindness? It starts, as it did for Leo, with awareness. It starts by noticing our own impulses. When you feel that urge to give unsolicited advice, just notice it. When you feel the pull to join in on gossip, just notice it. When you feel the need to fill a silence with chatter, just notice it. You don't have to judge it or shame yourself for it. The impulse is human. The art is in the pause that follows the impulse. In that pause, you can ask a simple question. What does this situation truly need? Does it need my words, my action, my noise? Or does it need my silence, my restraint, my space? It also requires a redefinition of strength. Our society often equates strength with force, with volume, with action. But there is a quiet, immense strength in restraint. The person who can absorb an insult without retaliating is strong. The person who can hold a difficult emotion without lashing out is strong. The person who can maintain their integrity in the face of social pressure is strong. This is the strength of a mighty river that flows deeply and quietly, not the chaotic crash of a temporary wave. It's a strength that comes from a deep, internal center of gravity. As you go about your week, I want to leave you with a gentle challenge, a quiet practice. Try to find one opportunity, just one, to practice the kindness of inaction. Perhaps it's in a meeting where you choose to listen fully to someone else's idea instead of immediately formulating your own response. Perhaps it's with your family, where you choose not to comment on a minor issue that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. Perhaps it's with yourself, where you feel a wave of self-criticism, and instead of piling on, you simply allow it to be there without adding more words, creating a silent space for self-compassion. Don't look for thanks or recognition. The nature of this kindness is that it is almost always invisible. The reward is not external praise, but a subtle, internal shift. It's the feeling of integrity, the quiet confidence of knowing you chose the more thoughtful path. It's the slow building peace that comes from creating less noise and more harmony in the world around you. Leo's journey wasn't about becoming a perfect pianist. It was about becoming a complete musician. It was about understanding that music, like life, is a dance between sound and silence, expression and restraint, action and inaction. True kindness is the same. It is not just the beautiful, visible acts we perform. It is also the silent, courageous choices we make, not to cause harm, not to intrude, not to diminish another. It is the quiet music of empathy, self-regulation, and profound respect for the sacred space within and between us. It is the art of knowing that sometimes the most beautiful thing you can add to a moment is your gentle, considered, and powerful silence.